And from the Temple in Independence, Missouri, welcome back to CIMM Sessions, our little bite-sized servings of theology, culture, and community of Christ identity, mission, message, beliefs, and practices. I'm David Lloyd, the director for CIMM, the Center for Innovation in Ministry and Mission, and glad to have you all here today on what is a chilly day in the Independence area. The snow's melted, but the north winds came in a couple of days ago, and it's made it for a windy and cold winter day here. We're really pleased tonight to have with us someone who has greatly sacrificed to be here. Right now, it's about 7 a.m. in his country, and he has graciously agreed to join us. His name is Issac Bennett, or we know him as Joshua, and he is going to be talking to us from a different cultural experience from most of us in the western part of the world. He's going to talk about Jesus as an untouchable in discussion with the in relationship to the India caste system that has been a part of that culture. He comes from southern India to us tonight through the wonder of technology and Zoom, and we welcome here today. Welcome, Joshua. Go ahead.
Everyone, good morning from India and good evening from wherever you are. It is good to see you all. As David has given much introduction about me, and I knew Community of Christ since 1998 through my dad, and from that. I'm the second generation of knowing Community of Christ. It's great to be with you all. And right now I serve as a leadership development coordinator for mission centers in India. So I have completed my undergraduate and also my seminary studies in India, and as well as with Graceland University. So it's good to be with you all, and I would like to get in the topic of Jesus as untouchable. So I hope we will have a few minutes for the questions, and so please put in your chat, and then I will try my level best to address the questions as much as possible. So the topic is Jesus as an untouchable. For some, it might be a new, and sometimes for some it might be a disturbing. Why would we have to choose this topic? But from an Indian context, not only from an Indian context, but as a worldwide faith community that we share this identity as Community of Christ. It is important for us to be aware about the other side of the world as our sisters and brothers from the context where they live in. It might not be the same as the first world countries have, but as we strive towards in abolish poverty and inviting people to Christ and live out our mission initiatives, it is important for us to open our eyes and ears to those contexts which are vulnerable. So today, as we have seen the title Jesus as an untouchable, why we would say Jesus as an untouchable. So I'm going to make this presentation from the context of Dalits. Dalits could also be considered as marginalized, untouchables. So how those Dalits experiences the untouchability, how they are being considered as untouchable, and what it means to us as a worldwide faith community to respond faithfully. So it is in that context I'm going to talk about the untouchability in the context of Dalits. Even today, the problem untouchability still exists in human communities. And as I have stated earlier, it is important for us to reflect why there is a need for us to bring Jesus into this untouchable context is what we need to ask ourselves. So, with that question of why, I would move on to the second slide. So, the context of untouchability comes basically from the caste system. Um, the caste system is, as you know, the India is not a Christian country, but it is basically the majority are Hindus, the other living faiths, and there are many religions. But I'm just going to stick with the caste system. If we need to understand the caste system emerged from the Varna system in the according to the Hindu tradition. It is by birth humans are classified into four hierarchically uh, Varna system. So the top of would be called as Brahmin, would be mostly as priest and academics, and then second is Kshatriya, who would be sent as warriors and kings, and third one is Vaishyas, who would engage as merchants and landowners, and the fourth category is Sudra, the commoners, peasants, and servants. But there's one more community which doesn't even comes under this Varna system are untouchables, Dalits, who would be considered as outcast, street sweepers, latrine cleaners, those who take the animal skin and make drum, and if there is a death, and those would be asked to clean the body, the dead body. So those people, by birth and the occupation that they do, they are being considered as untouchable. So as you have seen in the triangle shape, that the untouchables are totally disconnected. They are not even considered as human beings. That's the one of the when you it's more of their life experience when they are not being included in the society. We could see how much vulnerable position they are being placed. As we see the Dalits for outside the caste system. In reality, too, the life experience of Dalits are on the edges. That's very vulnerable position. So I wanted to quote the scholar J. Suratnam, one of the Old Testament scholar who continued to teach at the United Theological College, where I did my Bachelor of Divinity as Old Testament. He says Dalits mean the broken, the oppressed. In practical terms, they are called as untouchables. So it would be around 15.74% of the total Indian population. So now you all know Mahatma Gandhi, and I don't need to say about him, but it is also important for us to know about Bhima Rao Ambedkar, so shortly known as B.R. Ambedkar. Um, Also known as affectionately as Baba Sahib, a father of for I would say as Dalit community. He was a Dalit, and the interesting thing is one who played a vital role in writing the Constitution of India. He was a politician and lawyer, and is considered as a great pioneer for as a leader of the untouchables and Dalit community. Even today, there's a lot of inequality, disagreement among Christian in India on caste grounds. This is because of insistence on exclusive identities, that one community claim to be superior and another community, those who consider to be superior, continue to oppress the weak and the vulnerable. So that's basically we have to understand that it's a Hindu, it's predominantly by Hindu, and over the missionaries' arrival when the conversion took place, the caste systems still continue to be there. So we cannot say that once you convert to Christianity that you can just be called as Christians, but the caste system that is deeply grounded still exists. So, understanding the context of untouchability, as I have shared, when missionaries arrived in India, they encountered a deep society deeply shaped by caste system. So, the caste divisions influenced everyday life, identity, status, and social boundaries. People from different castes could not share meals, especially those who comes under untouchables, Dalits. They would be completely restricted from any access to the to share the meals with the higher caste or any common spaces. So social discrimination operated through food, dress, occupation, and social interaction. So missionaries realized that changing the caste mindset would not be easy, as it was embedded in culture, religion, and social norms. So the stigma of separation, as we have seen, the term Dalit originated from the root word Dal, signifying a broken people. So that's many Dalit scholars would go with this the word, how it's meant, it's related as broken people. It represents a combative force for a change, confrontation, and revelation. Dalits were identified as outcast, polluted people, and were considered unapproachable and even unseeable by the dominant system. The stigma of untouchability unites them. They were restricted from accessing temples, festivals, schools, and public places like water resources. For example, if there's usually Dalits are placed not inside the society but the outskirts of the society, where you are completely disconnected in accessing common sacred spaces like temple, and you would not be invited to any of the festivals that are celebrated by the upper castes. And when you go to in schools, Dalits would be asked to sit down and not on the chairs or the tables, and even Dalits would be denied to walk on the roads, and they people would think that becomes polluted when the let's walk on the roads. So we would see. So I will move on to the next, and we are going to see some of the examples of how the separation and exclusion that the Dalit community continue to face. So, in understanding the context of untouchability, one of the prominent scholar, Devasahayam, he was a bishop for the Church of the Anglican Church in India, condemns Christians who fail to forbid caste discrimination within the churches. He further asserts that Christians who claim to be born again must be born against the demon of caste as an expression of repentance. So he relates of how we claim as I am born again, but here he's connecting with the caste system. So how caste system, how vulnerable and how continue to be as an evil in segregating people in terms of discrimination and marginalization. So, when we try to understand the context of untouchability for Dalits, eating meat, especially beef, was part of their food culture. Dalits would always segregate it from their village and given a place where there is no proper access to food and other resources for livelihood. So, even when what you eat, that with that people try to segregate and exclude you. So one of there are two prominent Christian missionaries who played a vital role. One is Robert D. Noble, who worked on the upper caste people, and Francis Xavier worked on the downtrodden, those who are on the edges. And especially he saw in the Dalit culture, drinking wine and eating meat, something very interesting. And that kept that people on the edges. And what he did was uh, um, to make to for the people to embrace him as one among their communities. he sat with them and ate beef and drank wine, and that could also be, I mean, that was a great sign of Dalit hospitality, which is another topic. But here, what I share is when the missionaries came and ate, and that made the people to overcome that we are no more being considered as a marginalized, and the gospel that he preached was embraced as their own. And that's how, if you can see on the coastal areas in India, where you would see the Christian symbols, and so how those, it's most of them, how they got converted to Christianity. So seeing that Dalits were also the, still even today, Dalit accessing to temples, schools and festivals is continue to be there. So that's what we need to understand. And one of the things, Dalits women are considered as Dalits of the Dalits. So here I'm just highlighted one of the prominent, well-known Dalit feminist theologian, Aruna Dasan, that Dalit women, she states that Dalit women are the most vulnerable among the oppressed. So she describes them as Dalit of the Dalits because they suffer a three level of oppression. One as a Dalit, and second as a women, and third economically, they are downtrodden. So which has been shaped by centuries of social, political, economic, cultural, and religious injustice. So here I just have quoted of Dalits, how the Skaria, I have just footnoted it down, how the Dalits have become the victims of the caste system, that they continue to economically, politically, and socially, economically weak and politically powerless and socially marginalized. So I have just highlighted some of the scriptures, of how important or biblical and theological engagement is important from the untouchable context. So it is important for us to understand the God. So for me, until I got into my seminary, I was not aware about the term Dalit. It was a search for me of what identity is, because many times some parents try to tell them that they are Dalits, but sometimes they try to not reveal the identity, the caste identity, because they might think that, oh, my son or daughter would go through the same experience of marginalization and discrimination. So it's continuous for those kind of parents. It's a continuous struggle, and they try to hide the identity from their children's. And but it was in my seminary where I understood, where I got to know the word Dalits, and much more deeper of who I am. And so it is from there, I have always, from my childhood, was known as God as a powerful, the mighty King. But here, this changed my concept of God, and especially the Jesus upside down. How we need to look God, Jesus Christ, and the Holy Spirit from below, from the context of Dalit, from a context of as an untouchable. So I'm just going to highlight some of the scriptures, and some of the elements, how the context of untouchability, what makes them, the people to be felt as untouchable, and they have been continue to secluded from the mainstream of the society. So here I have borrowed the Dalit elements of dirt, spit, mud, dust, and blood. So in many contexts, this would be seen as something not to be in contact, that something is untouchable. So here I have just derived this concept from the book written by scholar Solomon Sudhakar, a Dalit scholar. The name of the book is The Polluted God, a Theology of the Unbecoming Messiah. So there he talks about Isaiah chapter 53, 7. As we know, the chapter talks about a suffering, a servant, a Messiah who bears injustice, rejection, violence, not as a weakness, but as a profound act of redemptive solidarity. So if you get access to this book, you would know the reason behind of my summarizing some of the points here. So in our interpretation, Christian interpretation, we see Jesus as a silent, as suffering servant, which as before accusation and violence. That's also highlighted in Mark 15 chapter 1 to 5. And silence, Jesus silence was becomes a theological protest. He would argue as a theological protest, refusing to legitimize to any kind of systems of domination, humiliation, and exclusion. So there he sees both vulnerability and divine strength. So this would be the same as with the Dalit community, of their lived reality, of their experiences of being silent when they experiences the oppression, but yet not giving up their strength. So that's how we can understand when we connect with this scripture. So here he argues that their silent existence is not merely social, it's also theological. It confronts us with the reality that human dignity is still crucified in our midst. Thus, the suffering servant Christ stands not above Dalit bodies, but among them, within them. So, this is what we need to understand. So, and then the second thing is of taking of John chapter 9, verses 6, Jesus adopting a traditional practice of healing a blind man. So, we all knew the practice of spitting the saliva and healing him. So, in his book, he has argued, many of the scholars, of how saliva itself has become a curing material, or has a curing power. In that book, if you just read it, you would understand. But the way he connects Dalits as an untouchable is very, very interesting. So there are two instances that is recorded in, we can see in Mark chapter 7:33 and Mark 8 chapter 23. So we could see all these elements of dirt, spit, mud, and dust, and blood could be involved in healing the person. So in this, we could see the very material that are considered as polluted is bringing wholeness and transformations. So thus Sudhakar would argue Jesus himself became polluted as well as the polluter. So the way we relate to the context of Dalit is over many years ago, and when Dalits would be tied. This is what he argues in his book. Dalits would be tied pot around their neck in order to spit saliva. They are not supposed to spit. They are supposed to spit on the pot so that they don't pollute, and the upper caste don't get or not being polluted by their saliva. And then they would be tied broom around, as you can see the picture. I apologize for not being clear. So when they walk, the place is not being polluted, so that the broom cleans the space. So this was had an impact. Why still even today the Dalits, so though even though the modern technology has developed, but the reality of Dalits in many places is unseen are more critical and vulnerable, and then the pain that they go through is very, very deep. And so this we can see of how even the saliva when they spit is for the upper caste is becomes a polluted area. So we can see the untouchability, how the untouchability continue to work in the context, and how it continue to segregate the human community. This is about the manual scavenging, which still exists. In my childhood, I would have seen this, and as I have moved to the metro cities, and not much I have seen, but in many places, when the machine door doesn't work, it's Dalits who are called. So it's very interesting. The one who makes the place unclean with the feces is called as something, clean, and the one who comes to clean the material, in some many cases it's the human feces. Dalits are because of the economic struggle, they would be asked to clean the human feces. So this is the manual, this is the context of manual scavenging thing. So those who comes to clean are called as polluted. So we can see how the concept, and not the concept, but the reality of Dalits in India. And this is just, I know the picture might be disturbing for many, but I'm not that was, I mean, I need to bring out the reality of how people are lived out. And so, from the Dalit context, so you can see women cleaning the toilets, and the toilets could be bad, as we can't even imagine. So now I'm just bringing our attention to Jesus Christ. What role does Jesus Christ? So for many of us, accepting as Him as a Savior, and okay, now the life has changed. It would be, in the Western context, it would be, more appropriate. But here, even when you are a Dalit, when you convert to Christianity, he can go through oppression and marginalization even within the churches. That's the reality where many Dalit scholars are trying to address that. And those writings have made a good contribution. So here, one of my he's my mentor, the name Joseph Prabhakar Daim. He was my mentor for my Bachelor of Dignity for 4 years. So he is bringing the Dalits' tales and stories, and how he bringing the divine feminine. So he would say pollution is privileged as a necessity in the divine in human interaction, and the life-giving and life-saving acts of the divine. To be divine is to be polluted. So he brings this the story of Gautama. So when you get to read it, so as my time is limited, so I'm just giving you a summary of that. So how the untouchability emerges, when one gets polluted and they are being considered as untouchable, and how we need to shift our theological thinking from that context. So Sudhakar claims the same way the goddess with Jesus Christ, who have been considered as polluted and polluting, is where the wholeness and restoration is possible. So, and moving on to Matthew chapter 9, 20, and Mark 5:25, here we can see of how the blood and death, how blood and death are considered here as something as polluted, and that makes people to be as considered as untouchable. But in the scripture, what we see is a woman who had a chronic bleeding receives healing from Jesus Christ. So all the societies still have various taboos, particularly menstrual blood and death, is always associated with pollution. So this comes from the book of law in the Hindu tradition that is called Manusmriti, where it says that the one who in contact with blood and death is always considered to be as an untouchable. So it's then where women menstruating is always seen as polluted, and anyone gets in contact is also considered as polluted. So we all know the story, and I'm not getting into the exegetical part of that, but what I'm trying to share, the Dalit context will help you to correlate. So women are kept in separate spaces and denied all access to food, common areas, uh, crops, wells, and other sacred places. So I have seen from my childhood where now I get to think, okay, why the people are kept, women who attains puberty, they would be kept outside of their house for some like 10 to 15 days. And so now I don't see that anymore, but I have seen those kind of discrimination. So even today, the blood related taboos are very severe. Those involved with blood are expected to keep away from others so that they do not pollute others. So even many women, even today, when I was went to the leadership training, when I was giving the training, and then during the question and answer session, and when one woman stood up and asked, during the menstrual time, can we come to the church? And then I said, yes. So those kind of taboos, even, which gives them the fear, can we still access? Um, uh, am I, will I be polluting others? So this kind of things are very, very challenging when we try to address from the cultural perspective. As this text, Matthew 9:20, of the way in which Solomon Sudhagar engages, it's very, very interesting. And Jesus did not avoid those associated with the blood, and his ministry uh, brought the restoration and wholeness. Precisely is his willingness, his courage and bold to make contact with the women, where most of them who were surrounding him was very fearful to even bring out the voice of the women. But Jesus recognized the touch of that woman. So it is the touch that that made Jesus to be aware, and he just liberated the women. So here we can see Jesus reverses blood related purity laws and cultural stigmas, especially those placed upon women, and transform them into spaces of dignity, healing, and freedom. So this is a very, very important for, as we have seen, uh, in that not only in Dalit context but as a worldwide faith community, it is important that we need to listen to those who not only are poor but also those who are on the edges, those who are on the margins, and allowing them to be creating a safe space for their dignity, healing, and freedom. So here I have just highlighted as Jesus Christ as polluted and polluter. So the even today the blood of Jesus is a symbol of profound healing, reconciliation, and liberation. So through this radical act, blood, once a symbol of exclusion, becomes a sacred instrument of liberation. So I quote from Solomon Sudhagar, Jesus, both as polluted and as a polluter, employed blood in a very powerful way towards liberation. So it is also important for us to understand, we tend to think Jesus Christ is from above, but unless we relate to our context and unless we see Jesus from below, Jesus would always be as a mighty God, but someone from the marginalized communities. For them, Jesus from above would not make much more sense, but rather when you try to context and relate Jesus from above, for me as a Dalit, it is always it very much resonates when I tend to think, is Jesus, my Jesus is a Dalit, and he is an untouchable, and that is when it makes much more sense and relevant, and I connect gospel in a much more in a useful sense. So we must always see Jesus Christ as the one who's sent by God, fasting from below. And as I have said, so we'll move on to the next in reflecting Jesus and his Dalitna. So many scholars would, I have just quoted it, where Arul Raja would say Jesus works with the Joseph, a carpenter. He had been employed like as a manual laborer, like Dalits, and he identified himself with the outcasts like lepers, tax collectors, Samaritans. He touched the sick and the dead, and so thus he proposes Jesus' Dalitness based on his birth and his identification with the voiceless community. This is very, very important. And Solomon Sudhagar would also talk about how pain and rejection, God was not only as pure, holy, and distant, but how his willingness to enter the places of pain, rejection, through his life ministry and sacrifice of Jesus Christ. So this helps us to understand Jesus not as savior above suffering, but as a co-sufferer who stands with the oppressed and the despised, especially with the untouchable. So here I have just drawn from the African American theology as Jesus is a companion of oppressed, and the portrait has influenced Dalit theological undertakings where often Dalit theology perceives Jesus as a Dalit because of his birth and vocation. So Anthony Kaliat would say Jesus had a Dalit birth, a Dalit life, a Dalit death, and a Dalit burial. So when I say Dalit, you can also put the word as an untouchable. As you have seen, we have seen in the pictures that I have showed in the very beginning of my presentation, how where does the untouchable are placed in the society. So uh, I'm again quoting as J. Saratanam, who would say Jesus chose to be a Dalit as an outcast and unrecognized by society. He became the rejected stone but was elevated as the keystone in the revolutionary process. The way he is interpreting, he's written a book on Psalms 22 from a Dalit liberative hermeneutics from an Indian Christian Dalit interpretation perspective. So there we could see, and out of his researches, he is trying to bring out the thought. And it is important for us to move into theological voices and missional moving. And I would move on to how community of Christ is working in this Dalit context. So that I would like to share at the very end of my session. So, in terms of Dalit culture, their folk stories, songs, their unsaid, unwritten stories, everything becomes an important tool to engage with Dalit theology, to move forward. So that's why I've just included of Dalit hospitality is also another vast topic, but I've just here I have highlighted. So I did my research on Dalit hospitality as an authentic way for Christian mission to move forward. So, excuse me. Again, it reminds us the things that like dirt, spit, mud, and dust and blood, which have been used in society to silence and degrade Dalits, especially Dalit women. So, how we could see Jesus using the same elements to heal, restore, and set people free. This challenges us to see what society calls polluting can become a source of transformation and liberation in God's hand. So, I've just highlighted maybe these. in Hindu traditions, such as walking on fire, undergoing physical strain to encounter divine. So I was even reminded of my pastoral ministry where Dalit communities, when they attend, that's mostly we could say that is they have been influenced by this Pentecostal behavior. But at the same time, I also see from their Dalit context of how, even just the way when they come in India, in our worship service, we clap when we sing a song. That's in our culture. And but not only clapping, but the way they try to outburst or what the ecstasy or the way they express their faith, by crying during the worship. So it all comes out of their pain and oppressions. So that's how I look. So I look as the holy protest and I cry for justice, their trauma, the childhood traumas and the discrimination that they may continue to go through even in the society where they live. So uh, how the language of survival, resistance, and hope you might see from their faith perspective. So I have borrowed from James Cone the idea that those who are considered as untouchables and polluted are the signs of hope for the creation of a human community. So he would talk from a black people perspective, the people of color. But here I'm just talking about from the Dalit perspective, and he says our calling is derived from the people who have been through trials and tribulations of this world. And then I'm sorry. So now I've just talked about the implications of the church. Even today, many mainstream churches continue to struggle in bringing Dalits to the altar and also ordaining them. And many Dalit face exclusion within the churches. So that's where we can see church is called to be a missionary agent, becoming more self-committing towards the outcast and vulnerable. So we must resist all kind of oppression, exploitation, and exclusion. So to conclude, holiness is not preserved by avoiding impurity, but revealed through courageous engagement with the excluded, untouchable, marginalized, and vulnerable. So Jesus did not fear pollution. So he entered the spaces of stigma and transformed them into spaces of healing and dignity. So pollution becomes a site of divine encounter where boundaries are broken and humanity is restored. So you might see what this picture is. These three women are Dalits who serve as a mission center presidents in Community of Christ. And even many mainstream churches struggle with Community of Christ. We can all proudly say that these women have now access altar. They don't totally access altar, but they play a very vital role in moving the mission forward. So it is from the pain, it is from the context of exclusion, marginalization, their mission is carried out. And we could see how effective and that's a blessing for the worldwide faith community. It is not only the mission center where they served, and I wanted to say the one first is Sister Bharati, who is ordained as an high priest when Stacy Graham visited recently, and the one who is in the middle is my wife Rina and Ronita, and the one who is on the far left corner is Sister Sumati, who is an elder. So both of them, Sister Bharati uh, is a high priest, and Reena and Sister Sumati are are the elders, and they serve as a mission center team. So three women in India. So it's been led. So we make a mission forward, but it is also important. One of the things I have learned is as a worldwide community, faith community, we have presence, we have our church presence all over the world, and we do have some cultural challenges, but primarily above, for me, is more than what my nationality is. It is the sacred identity where I am being called. This community of Christ is helped me during my seminary to search for my identity, and it is that community of Christ gave me the courage to embrace Dalit. It did not give me fear. It did not scare. If I would have been in another not community of Christ, I would have felt very much scared to come out and say I'm a Dalit, because I would be scared that I might go through discrimination and marginalization. So it is the identity, the name of community of Christ, uh, that give me the courage to embrace and continue to work with the marginalized and oppressed. So with this, I will conclude and give it to David.
Uh, wow. Yeah, it's always good to for us to hear of some of the cultural challenges that are taking place. And a lot of times we Westerners like to say, wow, those are big problems that I'm so glad we don't have, which is not true at all. I'm hoping people who are watching this will be able to make a number of the connections between what is culturally a system in India and our own struggles as human beings uh, in how we cast people, how we abuse different groups of people. But first of all, Joshua, I'd like to ask: does it feel like the future is bending toward an India that does not recognize the caste system as much?
Um, so it would be an outward expression to give that to the world, but in reality, it is not the same. It's
Yeah,
not. So even
yeah,
today, even maybe in the places where I have, it's more serious in the northern part of India as well as in the villages. So it's
yeah,
still there. It's still there. Dalit would be given a separate glasses to drink tea, you know, and Dalit bodies would not be able to carry for the funeral if the road they are not being able to access that road. The
yeah.
dominant caste community. Even today, human feces are thrown to the water tanks, so that is an issue. So it's yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. You also mentioned that Christians in India are also in, I think you said, disagreement over the caste system. I'm really interested in that. Yeah, are you saying that some Christians actually support the caste system?
um, I would say yes. See,
Oh my.
it's the work of Dalit theologians, Arvind P. Nirmal, when he gave the lecture on Shudra theology. So he coined the term Dalit, especially in Christian context, because until then they were using the liberation theology, Indian Christian theology, which was very Brahminical ideologies. So that from that you can see, for most of the dominant caste communities, priests in the mainstream churches, for them, even in other independent, in the Christian ecclesial community, for them, the issue of Dalit would no more be, for them, it's not important to address. But for Dalit theologians, and it is very important that the problem of Dalits exclusion when continue to exist even in the churches, so it needs to be addressed.
Yeah, as a more liberal American Christian, I'm dumbfounded by that, and yet I recognize we do it here in America in a lot a lot quieter format, but it is done the same. And I actually think me thinking through this process of your culture helps identify it in my culture also. which is good why we need to have these conversations. So let's talk specifically about Community of Christ and how they work with the Dalit community. Is there an inherent danger for your group to kind of be turning the tables on this system?
Uh, uh, I would say uh, the mission presidents, you know, it's a small step that we do it. And we do have people from other caste, dominant caste communities. And when they faithfully engage with the enduring principles, they understand who we are and how worth of all persons and all are called is to be uplifted. Community of Christ, that's when they realize community of Christ is different and unique
Yeah.
in its mission in placing. We not only preach, but we act what we preach. So to answer your question, yes, they do have challenges, but continue to overcome that.
And yet it must be a wonderful opportunity of ministry for people who have been treated subhuman to be told that their God is representative of them.
Yes.
Yeah, beautifully put the concepts of blood and spit and that Jesus bled and Jesus spat and yeah, wonderful connections that I don't think we always recognize in our Western culture. Um, I want to make sure I get some of the questions from some of the people. First of all, I wanted to ask, you had mentioned the book, The Polluted God, The Theology of the Unbecoming Messiah. I have somebody else, Paul writes that it reminds me of Howard Thurman's Jesus and the Disinherited. So that might be another book. John wrote, I highly recommend the book Cast, The Origins of Our Discontinence by Isabel Wilkinson. Yeah, so any other books or resources that you would recommend, Joshua?
I would say I would encourage you to read Indian Dalit scholars book to if you're really, if you're passionate about in knowing much more how to interpret God, and that would help you to interpret God and preach the gospel from your own context and from the congregations or the mission centers you would serve. As I said, Solomon Sudhakar, Dr. Peniel Jesudas, and Rufus, who now serve as USPG in London. So that's an Anglican tradition. So he was as a professor here. So he has written many books, and my mentor has written many books, and I would just show this. I'm not sure whether you're able to see it in the camera. Dalit Theology by Satyanathan, edited by Satyanathan Clark and Dinabandhu Manchala and Philip Peacock. So I can just put it on the chat item, so you can
Oh, that'd
just
be great. That'd be great. And Jim Resch also said he was going to make the same recommendation of Isabel Wilkinson's book, Cast. She compares Dalits, Jews during the Nazi Germany, and the African Americans in the United States. She suggests that the caste actually exists as a foundational to racism, exploitation, oppression, and says, thank you for your concepts. I really do think that this is a great representation of what is a universal thing, and that is to recognize that Jesus came for those who were disenfranchised, those who were oppressed, those who were marginalized, and those of us who have power to do something to help and assist are called to Christ's call to respond. And especially at this Christmas season, this Advent season that we're in, to be reminded of that, I think is really important. And I appreciate you sharing that with us.